All right. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Today is November 11th, which in Canada means that it is Remembrance Day. So my name is Ashely Crouch, and I am the Interfaith Facilitator at the Concordia Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center. And as part of our annual Discover Multi-Faith Fair, we have decided to put on this panel in honor of Remembrance Day to have conversation about building peace, reflecting on the past, and looking at our future together from a faith perspective. And so we have assembled a panel of 5 panelists from different faiths and a moderator, and we're going to go through a few questions and hopefully have time for questions from our attendees afterwards. So thank you everybody for joining, and what I'm going to do now is read the bios of I'll start with the moderator, and then I will read our panelists, and you can just wave when I say your name so that people will know who you are. And then after that, Diane will take over, and she will guide us in a short candle ceremony in honor of the day, and then we will begin with the official panel. So, all right. So Diane, who is our moderator, would you like to wave? Okay. So Reverend Diane Rollert is in her 15th year as a senior minister of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. She is the 11th settled minister since the founding of the church in 1842 and the first woman to serve in this role. She completed her Master's of Divinity at Harvard Divinity School after careers in the online information industry and education. She is president of the Coalition Inclusion Quebec and past president of the Christian-Jewish Dialogue of Montreal, as well as the Unitarian Universalist Association's ambassador to the Unitarian Universalists of Europe. She has served as a sabbatical minister in the Philippines and as a frequent speaker and workshop leader for national and international organizations, as well as an advocate for the rights of women and religious freedom. So that is our wonderful moderator today. Next, we have our first panelist, who is Adriana Cabrera-Cleves. Yes, and she is representing the Baha'i Faith. So Adriana is the Baha'i Faith liaison at the Concordia Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center. She is a native of Colombia and has served as director of the Interreligious Affairs Bureau Public Affairs of the Baha'i Community in Montreal since 2011. Adriana is a museologist, researcher, and consultant in human rights, social justice, and museology with extensive international experience. She is interested in investigating the challenges and prospects for strengthening human rights and for meeting future challenges to advance equality through the study of museums devoted to human rights issues. Adriana's research is aligned with the rise of an unprecedented consciousness that we all belong to a single emerging world civilization and that our survival depends on the acceptance of a transcendent ethos of human dignity for all. Moreover, museums are becoming agents of social change, and Adriana is exploring how these institutions can contribute to bringing about lasting social, moral, and spiritual transformation in connection with social movements and grassroots activism. Her perspective also responds to the need of developing an effective system of global justice with international institutions as part of an evolutionary process and the necessity of building a spiritualized world culture that will enable human dignity to be realized. Currently, she teaches at Concordia University and is pursuing her doctoral degree in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Our next panelist is Daryl Lynn-Ross, who is representing the Buddhist tradition. So you can wave hello. Daryl Lynn-Ross is deeply engaged in contemplative practices for over 40 years with teachers and mentors from several Buddhist traditions and within the Christian spiritual tradition. She has served for 22 years as university chaplain at Concordia University in Montreal. Co-founder of True North Insight Meditation, Daryl teaches local groups and intensive courses, mentors and counsels in personal meetings, and offers a wide range of retreats. She lives and transmits the Buddhist teachings from the heart with a sensitivity to the unique path of each person. Next, we have Rabbi Ellen Greenspan. You can wave for us. Hello. Rabbi Ellen, as the name suggests, is a Jewish rabbi, so she will be representing the Jewish tradition today. She has been the rabbi educator at Temple Emmanuel Beth Shalom since 2014. Rabbi Greenspan was ordained at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York. She received 2 master's degrees from HUC, the Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, a Master's of Hebrew Letters and a Master's in Jewish Education as well. She did her undergraduate work at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, where she graduated with honors in religion. Rabbi Greenspan lived with her daughter Adina in Randolph, New Jersey from 1998 until her move to Montreal. Adina is currently living in New York City, where until the pandemic hit, she worked backstage on Broadway. So, proud mom. Next, we have Peter Haresnape, if you would like to say hello, wave, yeah. So Peter Haresnape is joining us from the Christian tradition today. Peter Haresnape, his pronouns, came to Turtle Island from the UK in 2010 after training with Christian peacemaker teams and joined the Indigenous Peoples Solidarity Team. Since 2016, he has worked as national coordinator at the Student Christian Movement of Canada, and since 2019 has also been serving Toronto United Mennonite Church as a pastor. Peter is one of the founders of the Cahoots Festival, which explores faith, justice, and do-it-yourself learning and empowerment towards direct action. He lives with his husband Ken and housemates in Toronto. Peter enjoys Arthurian literature, ecumenical worship, Bible studies with foregone conclusions, and drinking cups of tea with friends or enemies. And then last but not least is Imam Salam Elmenyawi, if you'd like to wave to everyone. Great. Imam Salam Elmenyawi is the president of the Muslim Council of Montreal, the Muslim chaplain at McGill and Concordia University, president of Asuna Mosque, one of the largest and oldest mosques in Montreal. He taught Islamic theology courses at Concordia University. So those are our panelists and our moderator, and now you know a little bit more about them and their backgrounds. And so at this point, I will pass it over to Diane and just ask that everyone else remains muted until it is your turn to speak. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ashely. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I just wanted to offer you a candle lighting ceremony for Remembrance Day. I'm going to light 3 candles. And this first candle is for all the soldiers known and unknown who have served Canada in past wars. The second candle represents our sadness and concern for all the soldiers, young and old, who are currently serving in places of unrest around the world, many of whom have no voice in the conflicts they must face. And this third candle is for all the civilians, children, and adults, known and unknown, who have lost their lives to war, as well as for the many people in this world living homeless because of war. These too deserve their day of remembrance. May these flames hold the complexity of our thoughts and emotions for this day. So may it be. Amen. So we have a first question, which is to ask, what does your tradition say about peace? And so I would like to, I'm going to invite you to speak in the order in which you arrived, so that way I didn't have to make a decision as to who actually should go first. So Rabbi Greenspan, Rabbi Ellen, would you like to begin by answering that question?
Sure, I would be happy to. So, pretty easy. This was the easiest of the 3 questions for me to answer. I mean, Judaism is definitely a religion that believes in seeking peace and pursuing it. The greeting that we say is shalom, and that means peace or wholeness. So when we say, and it's the greeting that's used for both hello and goodbye. So there's this notion that peace is not, you know, it's the ideal state of affairs. It's not, peace is not just the opposite of war, but it's the true state of affairs. It's how we want the world to be. And in modern Hebrew, when you see someone on the street and you want to know how they are, the greeting is ma shlomcha or ma shlomech, depending whether you're talking to a man or a woman. And that literally translates as, how is your peace? Like, how is your life proceeding, or is your life proceeding in a peaceful manner? So peace is, of primary importance. The other thing I wanted to mention that I think is another example of how high we place peace in our value system is that during the week when Jews pray, part of the liturgy includes 18 petitionary prayers. We ask for things like knowledge and wisdom and bounty. We ask for healing. We pray for freedom. We pray for justice. We ask God for things. And on our Sabbath, on Shabbat, we omit all of these petitionary prayers because we're supposed to rest on Shabbat. So we don't want to ask God for something, because if God were to give it to us, that would imply that we would be asking God to work. So we don't ask for things on Shabbat except for peace. We never omit that prayer for peace from our liturgy. It is always something to strive for. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rabbi Ellen. I want to invite Peter to provide a Christian perspective.
Thank you. Well, unlike Rabbi Ellen, for me, this was the hardest question to answer. My religious tradition says a lot about peace, but actions speak louder than words. And as we're in occupied territory, colonized lands, I think it's important to acknowledge that Christianity has produced some of the greatest acts of violence in recent human history. The most charitable thing I think you can say is that Christianity failed to prevent things like world wars, slavery, capital punishment, genocidal colonial violence, the Holocaust, the creation of nuclear weapons, mass species extinction, and generally the hoarding of wealth to starve the masses and preserve the power structures. And if I had more time, I would be happy, or not really happy, but I'd be willing to dig into the ways that Christianity has been culpable for each of those pieces. But I've been asked to speak on behalf of the Christian tradition. I just want to acknowledge that my position within that tradition is twofold. I'm part of the ecumenical movement, which is the movement towards church unity, and is an anti-war, pro-peace movement. And I'm also a leader within the Mennonite Anabaptist community, which is a particular form of Christianity that, amongst other things, has really focused on the renunciation of violence and the pursuing of peace as core to our identity. So just to acknowledge that that's where I'm speaking from, and that's what I'm laying claim to. So from my perspective, anybody who takes the life of Jesus seriously, anyone who takes seriously his ethical teachings and the ethical teachings of his tradition cannot participate in or permit violence, and must be someone who attempts to make peace in the world, who renounces war and the preparation for warfare. So if you look at the earliest movements that we call Christian in the centuries after the life of Jesus, they were explicitly pacifist. And we know this because they wrote extensively that it was incompatible with Christian faith to pick up the sword, or even to participate in violent and coercive systems like government or criminal punishment, things like that. But of course, the reason they wrote about this was because it was an active question for them. They were trying to work out what it means to follow the example of this Jesus guy, while also living in a world that was full of violence. So Christians of my tradition point to the final hours of the life of Jesus. You may know that he had been preaching about the kingdom of God, not talking about the afterlife, but talking about a new reality of relationship that is not based on domination and power, but is based on cooperation and goodwill, based on this sort of holistic sense of peace. And he was put to death for that crime. And as they came to arrest him, one of his friends attacked and injured one of the group of people who were coming to arrest him. And Jesus stepped in and healed the person who'd been injured and told his friend, "Put away your weapon. because if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And the story goes on that Jesus didn't stay dead. He came back to life, and in doing so demonstrated that God's power is the giving of life, not the taking of it, and that death is not the ultimate answer or the ultimate power in the universe. And Christians who follow this are trying to do that. They're trying to remember, you know, we may need to be willing to suffer or to die, but we must always choose to offer liberation and healing rather than inflicting pain. So making sense of this history of Christian power and violence and domination, and how that does or doesn't relate to the Christian tradition, which is about offering peace and disarmament and living peaceably with our neighbors and with the rest of creation. That's a great challenge, and that's something that I have tried to kind of dedicate my life to understanding. I will stop there and look forward to getting some more specifics as we go.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for pointing out that none of us represent a monolithic religious tradition, and I really appreciate that, so thank you. The next person to speak, I'd like to invite Daryl Lynn-Ross to speak.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. What does the Buddhist tradition say about peace? Well, I'd like to say, first of all, that I come to Buddhism as a Western convert. So there are many places in the world where Buddhism is alive as a religious tradition with rituals and many different kinds of liturgical expressions, which in the West, those of us who have embraced Buddhist teaching, there's no uniform expression of that. So I'm going to kind of go to more the discourses, the suttas, the teachings, especially the early Buddhist teachings, because that's what I'm most steeped in. And so I would say that Buddhism emphasizes the connection between the inner experience of peace and the outer expression and living that. There's a core understanding in the teachings that the Buddha shared that beings, and especially focusing on human beings, deeply desire to be happy, to experience a sense of peace and well-being. And he framed his teachings around how to experience that freedom from suffering, which includes violence, which includes craving, which includes hatred. The inner experience of hatred itself is suffering, and then perpetuates suffering in the world as hatred or grasping is expressed in our speech and in our actions. So there are a couple of key things that the Buddha talked about, which illuminate how peace can be pursued and peace can be developed, both as an inner experience and an outer expression. So one is, and at the heart of the Buddhist teaching, there's something called dependent origination, and to simplify and in a shorthand way express what this means. It's that we don't exist separately from all of the life around us. So we breathe. We can't live without breathing. We drink water, we eat food. And we also need to exist in relationships as children, vulnerable children. We need to be raised, our values, our ideas, our speech, how we perceive the world around us. It's all shaped by other people in community. And so so the real cause of suffering and of expressing that suffering, which perpetuates violence in the world, is not knowing this, is ignorance of our profound interconnectedness to all of life. And so, so this is, you know, the word Buddha means awake, and this is what we wake up to in our lives. It's gradually over time through practice. And another, so that's one factor. And another teaching, I think, which is very relevant, is the ethical moral teachings, which are based on nonviolence, on ahimsa, so not expressing violence. And so for lay women, laymen, monks, nuns, these precepts are the same, although monks and nuns have many more precepts to follow, but not to take life. And then the flip side is to protect life, not to take what is not offered. And so the flip side of that is to be generous, not to speak harshly or without in a way that's not true. So, and that causes great harm. That's the Buddha pointed that out specifically, as how speech creates resentment and harm, and creates conflict and divisions between people. And not to be careless and unskillful and harmful in the way that we experience our sensual selves, our sensual beings, but to be mindful in that way, and not to take intoxicants that create carelessness. So to be mindful of this as well. So these are training precepts, they're guidelines, and so they create a framework for us. They're not do's and don'ts or commandments, but they create a framework for this process of waking up in our lives and becoming more peaceful and skillful and happy beings. So I think I've probably used my 5 minutes.
You have, but it's been very deep and very beautiful. So thank you for that. I want to go now to Adriana to talk about the Baha'i tradition.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm a member of the Baha'i Faith, as it was said at the beginning, and I want to thank you for the invitation. I'd like to answer this question. In order to answer this question, I would like to tell a little story where I'm impersonating a little bit the Baha'i principles and therefore the perspective of the Baha'i Faith. So I'll start by saying my country is the earth and my race is the human race. My religion has one common foundation with all other religions in the world, and all together make one. My reality as a human being is the soul. Therefore, my fundamental principle is the oneness of humanity. Unity in diversity, because we believe that humankind is one. My goals are world unity and world peace. So I want to continue this story by telling you that Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of the founder of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah, always asked people one question when he saw them. And he came to everyone and said, "Are you happy?" So I want to ask the same question to all of us who are here today or who will probably be listening to this recording later on. Are you happy? And the reason why I'm asking that question in connection to the I'm asking the question that Abdu'l-Baha in connection with the question we have for the panel is because we believe Baha'is that we are here to cheer our hearts, because we believe that peace is not only possible but inevitable. So that may sound a bit, given the state of affairs of the world, how can we say it's not only possible but inevitable? We believe that in all ages the prophets or manifestations of God, so Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, have foretold the coming of an era of peace on earth, of goodwill among peoples. So Baha'u'llah confirms these prophecies and declares that their fulfillment is at hand. So this is what we believe. So to conclude, I'm going to answer this question not so long, because I would like later on to talk a little bit more on how we believe that peace is possible. The Baha'i perspective on peace is that at this point, world peace is not only possible, but inevitable, and it is the next stage in the evolution of the planet. And I don't know if this was said before, but because my research also deals with human rights and social justice and indigenous issues, especially in Canada, I like to, I don't know if this was said before by Ashely, but I'd like to acknowledge that since this is broadcasted from the Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center at Concordia, that Concordia University is located on unceded indigenous lands. And the Kahnawake Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Totoyaki, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. And I bring this because this is part of also the process we're going in Canada and everywhere else, countries that have been colonized. I come from one, Colombia as well, to create that reconciliation and bring more of a just system. And that's how I conclude my first question. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you so much for the land recognition. We appreciate that. And I want to call on Imam Salam to share now about Islam and peace.
Did you call on me?
Yes, indeed. You are
because I can't hear your voice very well. There it comes a bit. But it's great to be here. And it's great for all of us to be together from different faiths to talk. It's a huge change around the world, in fact, that we are able to sit down and reflect and respect each other's values and ideas and to be able to converse about peace. It is great. All we heard in the past was talking about wars. In Islam, the word Islam by itself actually is derived from the word salama in the Arabic language, which has among its other meaning of purities and other meanings, the meaning of salam, which is peace. So the main objective, in fact, of Islam is peace based on justice. So justice is a very important part of long-lasting peace. And this is why we always relate not only to stop at the word peace, but we always seek justice that comes with peace. And this is mainly the message of Islam. Let me say just a couple of issues to show how peace is a very important and central part of Islam. Is as our Jewish Rabbi has mentioned earlier about Shalom, which is also Salam. So our greeting is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, meaning peace be unto you, the mercy of God and his blessings. So this is when we meet each other all the time, that we convey these greetings to show that we are meeting on the basis of peace. And of course, the blessings and the mercy of God Almighty that will certainly descend on us if that would be our objective and if that would be our direction. The second and very important issue also that highlight this idea in Islam is in most of our supplications and in our prayers in general, that we start with a special prayer first that comes ahead of all others, which it says, Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam wa ilayka arja salam hayyina rabbina bis salam wa adkhilna dar salam tabarakta rabbana wa ta'alayta hadha al-jalal wal ikram. Oh God, you are peace. From you comes peace. To you descends peace. Oh God, greet us with the greeting of peace and let us return to the abode of peace, which is, this is for relation to paradise, being that is the place where true peace would actually be at the end exist for those who seek peace in their life. And that's where it says, and let us go to the abode of peace. Tabarakta Rabbana Ta'ala, the Jalal Ikram, may be the blessing and the glory with you, O God. So I think that reflects very much about the central part of Islam, which is the fact that peace is that central part that everything else rotates around it. And I think there are so many other issues relating to peace, but having to keep with the time, I think this is good enough to reflect a bit about it, but we can elaborate on this with the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam Salam. I really appreciate it. I hope you can hear me better now.
Yes, very well.
Okay, good. I'm glad. We have, each of our panelists have spoken now on the first issue, and we had 3 questions, but I'm actually going to combine questions 2 and 3 into one question, just because I know that we want to also leave some time for our participants to ask some questions of the panelists. So what I'd like to ask you to answer is how your tradition or community deals with differing views on war, and how we can maintain respect and dignity towards others regardless of our differing views. And if you want to add into that a little bit about how your community may honor or observe Remembrance Day, I invite you to do that. But I think really this question gets to the heart of things, and I would love for each of you to be able to answer that. So I'm going to start again with Rabbi Ellen, and invite her to speak first.
Thank you. So I think, you know, the main, in my opinion, the main value of Judaism is that we should respect everyone and get along with, make every effort to get along with everyone. I mean, there are times when war is unavoidable. I mean, unlike some of the other traditions represented in this room, in this virtual room, Judaism's not a pacifistic religion. Like, Judaism says, you know, the commandment is you shall not murder, but it doesn't say you shall not kill. And if killing is in self-defense, or there are some times when war is inevitable, it's unfortunate, but there are times when war is even, I don't know, advocated for in Jewish tradition. But the flip side of that is that the Talmud says that if you save a life, it's as if you've saved the whole world. And so, you know, the life is of the utmost importance and of the utmost value. And it is our goal to save lives and to make peace where, you know, where there is no peace. So, you know, that, and how we view people who disagree with us. I mean, I think that, I mean, we've heard it from all of us, like, we all, ultimately, our traditions want peace, and we want everybody to get along, and how one chooses to get to peace, it might be different. But I think there's no avoiding that we all want peace. And that leads right into talking a little for a minute about Remembrance Day. And I think it's also a really high value in Jewish tradition to remember those who have gone before us, regardless of how they've died. It's, you know, remembering our deceased ancestors is a very high value in Jewish tradition. But people who've served our country, served our, you know, who've fought for our own existence and have fought for peace, is, you know, we absolutely acknowledge Remembrance Day in Canada, or in the States, today is called Veterans Day. It's also a day for honoring those who've served. And Judaism has lots of opportunities throughout the year to honor those who've come before us. And so we take every opportunity to do that. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or speak more about it, but I just would say that the most important thing is to strive for peace. And sometimes you get there by a war, but war is not is not the ideal, for sure. We want to avoid war if at all possible.
Thank you, Rabbi Ellen. I will invite Peter now to share as well.
So on this question of how we deal with differences of opinion, I'm going to speak predominantly to differences within my own tradition, within the Mennonite Anabaptist world. A really good question came up many years ago in the congregation that I now pastor, before I was a part of it. One of the attendees was a serving police officer, and she would sometimes come to church having done a shift. So she would be wearing her uniform and she would have her weapon with her as well. And this became a really big question for the church. What does it mean to have this weapon come into our sanctuary, into our, she obviously, couldn't like leave it outside because you can't leave a gun lying around. And we had I believe, quite a long and complicated conversation. What does it mean to people within our community who have suffered from police violence, who perhaps have been ejected from their homes and have come to Canada as refugees? And I think today we would have even more awareness of that with the movement against police brutality. But it speaks very much to the way my tradition deals with things, that we have a very long conversation about it, and that we try to hear everybody's perspectives. And we look for what are called the holy longings. What are the deeply held beliefs that are leading people into their positions, which may be at odds with one another, but they can still be understood as holy longings. So, what does it mean for that woman to be present in her uniform and to be blessed as part of our congregation in that part of her life as well? In the Mennonite tradition as well, I think back to the First and Second World War, where Mennonites were conscientious objectors, and that was kind of recognized by the government. My denomination produced a play about this recently, kind of exploring some of those stories. One of the interesting, there was an interesting gender dynamic. They would send them off to these work camps where they would work for a small amount of money and things like that. But their girlfriends could go and serve in hospitals as nurses and things like that without it being a breach with their traditional values. They were still participating in the war, but doing it in a different way. So they had this interesting movement within the Mennonite world where for the first time, the women were earning a lot more than the men were. And it created an interesting dynamic in the kind of the years after that. So an interesting outcome to that. But some men also chose to serve in the military, either out of personal conviction or simply because they had families to support and they needed to be able to work for money. And it's been really interesting to see some communities welcome them back regardless. Others actually would shun people who had gone to fight in wars and didn't really accept them back into the community, or accepted them back once they'd sort of renounced what it was they'd done. And others actually, upheld people who'd gone to serve in the wars as heroes in the same way. Just something about Remembrance Day specifically. Remembrance Day is not something that Mennonites celebrate usually. And I think part of that is because as a community, we're very attentive to symbols and what they mean. So you might be familiar with Mennonites who wear what is called the plain dress, or who only use technology of a certain type, so don't drive cars, they use horse and buggies and things like that. And that really stems from a desire not to be flashy or not to be proudful about our appearances, things like that. Today we might say not to do virtue signaling. They would rather that we live out virtues in our lives and have nobody know about it. And of course it doesn't really work because Mennonites dress differently to everybody else now. So they do stand out. But one of the things, Mennonites have many different traditions to uphold their values. So for example, we traditionally don't serve on juries because a jury is involved in exerting power over people, sentencing somebody. We don't vote or stand for positions of power for the same reason. And we don't show more respect to one than we do to another. So for example, if you do visit a courthouse as a Mennonite, you know, everybody's supposed to stand up whenever the judge comes in as a sign of honor. So if you're a Mennonite, you have to make sure you're already standing when the judge comes in, so that you can't stand up and show more honor to the judge, but you're also not disrespecting the judge. And we have these little things like that. And of course, individuals have, you know, many different ways, and some wouldn't care about anything like that, would be just happy to go along with it. But that's the teaching of the tradition. And I want to show this, this button we came up with many years ago. It says, "To remember is to work for peace." It's about the same size as the red poppy. And there's this other one here, which is the white poppy, which is not a Mennonite thing, but it's something I wear coming from the UK. And these are both attempts to engage with the tradition of remembrance that speak to it as a global and universal thing, saying we do not remember soldiers over anybody else. We remember everybody equally. You know, we also, so Remembrance Day for me growing up in the UK was about remembering British soldiers who had died. And for me as a Mennonite, that's not acceptable. We need to remember everybody. We can't privilege one nation over another. So that's a few points. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. I want to go on to Daryl.
Yeah, thanks. So what came to mind for this question about dealing with different views on war is a particular practice or set of practices called, these are called the Brahma Viharas, which in the ancient language of Pali, similar to Sanskrit, means heavenly dwellings. And sometimes, well, there's one teacher who translates the words as the best places to be. So, and these are so loving friendship is one, compassion is another, resonant or empathetic joy, taking joy in the well-being and happiness of others, and equanimity, having a quality of balance that doesn't get so attached to outcome that we're kind of pitting ourselves in conflict against a certain position. So in these practices, we bring these qualities of heart into a manifestation in different ways. We can say certain phrases or just open our hearts with loving kindness or compassion, usually focusing on one or another. And the practice is to in some kind of systematic way or in a more kind of open, fluid way to include within this kind of radiating of kindness or friendship, benevolence, those that we feel close to, those that we value and love, those that we feel kind of neutral about, you know, people we don't know very well, your neighbor, somebody you see at the store, you know, you say hi to, or just people you don't know, so which is most people in the world, and also people that you find difficult, so that, you know, just very intentionally, and in doing so, there's the affirmation that these are all beings like myself, like ourselves, who want to be happy, who want to be free from suffering, who want to experience peace and well-being. And so that affirms, that really grounds us in the felt understanding that views that we may have, that we are not those views. We might have an opinion on something. We might like this politician, not like that politician. We might think something is true, something is false. But views are not the being, that we are greater and more than the particular views. And so I found, you know, some people think that Buddhists are all about peace, but I've had conversations with people, with Burmese monastics who are not, and in Myanmar there's a persecution of the Rohingya people, an Islamic ethnic group, and it's a brutal, oppressive persecution. And I've had conversations with people who have practiced with monastics and with monastics, and I've been just really distressed to find that there's a minimizing and a kind of a denial of this terrible oppression that's going on right now. And so for me, my practice helps me to hold that, to be able to hopefully say what I truly believe to be true, in a way that brings it forward, that I hope helps someone to reflect on it, and at the same time not negating their humanity. So I think that that for me is kind of at the center of this. And just for Remembrance Day, it's not something, it's Buddhism has its roots in the East, and Remembrance Day, as we celebrate it, as we know it, is mostly a Western tradition. I think in recent years it's become more inclusive, the way that Reverend Rollert introduced it with the lighting of the candles and remembering all who died and suffered because of war, I think is a beautiful development. But it used to be a celebration of the heroes who conquered the other side. And so, so Buddhists per se would have no real connection with that, but as as people, as spiritual practitioners who are cultivating a heart that includes all beings, those that we feel close to, and also those that we may feel more distant from, or in some way divided from in the ways that we think, but that we're trying to open our heart to not exclude anyone. So I think that bringing that attitude toward Remembrance Day would be what I would say is how we would reflect on it and contemplate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing us to a very honest place. I want to now turn it over to Adriana.
Thank you. I think my microphone is on now. So about how our tradition honors or observes Remembrance Day, I'd like to say that the Baha'i community usually joins with others to observe and honor this day, Remembrance Day. And since the goals of the Baha'i faith are world peace and world unity, Baha'is are working actively towards peace, and every day, we could say, is Remembrance Day for us. As to how our community deals with the differing views on war and how we can maintain respect. About war, I would like to quote Abdul Baha. He says, this is from a book called Some Answered Questions. In this marvelous cycle, the earth will be transformed and the world of humanity arrayed in tranquility and beauty. Disputes, quarrels, and murders will be replaced by peace, truth, and concord. Among the nations, peoples, races, and countries, love and amity will appear. Cooperation and union will be established, and finally, war will be entirely suppressed. universal peace will raise its tent in the center of the earth, and the blessed tree of life will grow and spread to such an extent that it will overshadow the east and the west, strong and weak, rich and poor, antagonistic sects and hostile nations, which are like the wolf and the lamb, the leopard and the kid, the lion and the calf, will act towards each other with the most complete love, friendship, justice, and equity. The world will be filled with science, with the knowledge of the reality of the mysteries of beings, and with the knowledge of God. So we believe that our task in this age is to build a peaceful and harmonious world, a society that is peaceful. And we believe also that in a way we have now the means to do this, that universal peace will be established among the nations of the world by international agreement, and war won't be necessary, but there's a transition for that. So for us to build a united world civilization at this time that is based on justice for all, we believe there's a blueprint that we have principles such as universal education, equality of women and men, spiritual solutions to economic problems, a world economic system, a universal peace upheld by a world government. We need to understand, especially now with COVID, we can see that we cannot keep acting on solutions that are only for a group or a nation, because it's affecting everyone independently of what gender or race or citizenship or no citizenship we have. So at a personal level, we need to leave behind any type of prejudice of race, class, gender, ethnicity, religion, politics, nation, intellect, or material wealth. And we believe that the way to overcome prejudice in all of our hearts is by developing qualities. And one quality I want to highlight is humility. And perhaps humility can be based on when we become humble before God. So the understanding that when compared with the majesty and the glory of the creation of God, very insignificant. It doesn't make sense for one insignificant thing we can say to feel superior to another thing that in that comparison is also insignificant. We believe that we are all, if we use that a metaphor, we're all leaves of one tree and we're all fruits of one branch. And to answer the second part of the question, how can we maintain respect? Baha'i believes that in order to create peace in the world, the human beings are bound to change their life pattern from spiritual from material to spiritual. So we've developed greatly in the material sense, but the spiritual development hasn't catch up yet. And this is, I think, the imbalance we have today. Even in university, in academia, is a very materialistic approach. In order to demonstrate such a statement, I would like to share with you some extracts from the text of The Promise of World Peace. In 1985, the Universal House of Justice, which is the international governing council of the Baha'i community, addressed a peace message to the peoples of the world, inviting them to consider that a new social order can be fostered by all peoples, seeing themselves as members of one universal family. And the participation of every single person is key to create that new social order. So this message was presented to world leaders and others during United Nations International Year of Peace. And some of the key points reflect our present day situation. For instance, anyone looking at the condition of the world today may be struck by the dramatic changes that are taking place. So Baha'is believe that humanity is currently living at a demarcation line. It's like a transition. It's a line between the last part of an epoch that's marked by conflict, violence, war, and the early beginning of an era, we could say a golden era, where humanity as a whole will commit itself to a common project of learning to live together in peace. And that diversity we have is wonderful, is rich, and we can be unified while keeping that diversity. So Baha'i believes this process of individual transformation and the society transformation, so it's dual, collective and individual, is happening through different forces that are at work in the world today. So we have
Adriana.
Yeah.
Adriana, I just want to, I'm wondering if you could put into the chat what you want to read, because I want to make sure that I have enough time for Salam to also speak, because we're supposed to finish in less than 15 minutes. So
So how much time do I have left to answer?
You don't. Your time is up. Yes, your time is up. I'm so sorry. But so I'm wondering if you might be able to put what you were going to read, if you could put that into the chat for everyone to then to be able to see. I'm so sorry to do that, but I want to make sure, and then perhaps if we have time at the end, we can come back to it. So Salam, I'd like to give you time to speak as well.
Yes, thank you. Well, it's a difficult question for the Muslim world and for the Middle East in general. The First World War, maybe before I say this, I want to first recognize and appreciate people who sacrifice themselves for the sake of protecting their own nations. Those who we remember them today that went out taking orders, rightly or wrongly orders, they did go out and they did try to what they thought defending Canada, and most probably we are enjoying today certain degree of freedom that without their sacrifices probably would not have been there. But having said that, I must acknowledge also that the First World War was a devastation on the Middle Eastern countries and majority Muslim countries. And of course, the Muslims, Christians, or Jews that lived in the Middle East at that time, they all suffered. But basically and mainly, it was on the Muslim world that we have seen this kind of devastation. They have the war started because of one of the many reasons was imperialism. But it was those countries that were under occupation or under control of other outside nations. And therefore, they actually offered to fight with the alliance, and then they ended up, unfortunately, being all those promises being broken. The Middle East today, the way we see it, the map we see it today was divided by Sykes-Picot in 1916 as a secret agreement, and finally it ended up to go the direction it went. The Remembrance Day is one of the days of God. It was an end of war. It is something for all of us to celebrate. Ending the war was something great for everyone, whether in the Middle East or anywhere else. There were lots of abuses at the time of war and lack of peace, of course. So for everyone, whether you were a main contributor to the parties fighting each others, or you were in the margin, everyone suffered. So today, when we reflect on it, we rather think, how can we avoid something like this in our day and time? How can we deal with each other, especially that Islam is no longer a religion of the Middle East only, but it is rather everywhere. It is part of Canada, it is part of America, it is part of England or France, so is Germany. So today, I think we have bypassed those lines, the lines of religions and sitting there. So I think there's a lot more of exchanges like this one when we talk together and reflect about some of our pains, the pain we have suffered when we went through this period, like my grandfather and others who lived at this time. We still, the stories, we hear them, and they are part of our culture and part of what we hear. But in general, just to add, we always relate to the word justice. Justice is probably the key, and it is also the key for peace, the key for lasting peace. It is to be based on justice. When we look today around the world and we see, while Muslims make 27% of the population of the world approximately, they're actually 80 to 85% based on the United Nations statistics. 85% of the refugees around the world are Muslims. And of course, this shows that they are still in the midst of all these kind of conflict areas, and they're trying to get off what was designed in 1918 or 1916, and then the Second World War, and continued to drag some of these issues together. I think it is about time now for all of us to look for peace. Islam, as I mentioned earlier, just not to leave anyone with a misunderstanding, while we seek peace, and we said this is peace based on justice, and the Holy Quran spoke clearly about it. He said, وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسِّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And if they recline toward peace, you do too, and trust on God. That's an order from God to every Muslim. And unfortunately, those days, there were abuses of some of these teachings and some of these educations and some of these directions. But there are also instructions from God, and fight those who fight you, but do not transgress the limits. So these are the boundaries by which we move. Knowing that, I think we can also, and I do appreciate what Peters have said, and what many of you have said to come up with honest words and reflect on some of these issues. It is really amazing, and it is great, as well as Adriana also what she said. But today there has to be that, while we do have the United Nations that came after all these issues, we have to all work together and continue to work together to bring attention toward the fact that the justice must be there in all of our actions and all of our directions, as we seek it for everyone, regardless of his faith, background, culture, color, the directions in life, and the choice of how he's going to live his life. Still, we have to adhere to justice and work toward that. I think this is the key issue, that the key points that I can relate to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salam, and thank you, everyone. I want to, I think if we can remove the spotlight now and perhaps move to the gallery view so we can all see each other. And
does it show the gallery view for you guys now?
Yes, we now
great.
see. Thank you so much, Brian. So we have about 6 minutes left, which is not enough time for questions, and I think what our panelists have demonstrated, is that this is such a deep topic, and that we need more conversations like this, that we all, in our traditions, we all dream of peace. We really do. And I truly believe that. And we all struggle to get there. I mean, if we are truly honest with ourselves, we are all struggling to get there. And we need to, I think, as you have all said, we need to work together in order to realize peace in our lifetimes, or peace in the lifetimes of our children or the coming generations. And so with just 5 minutes left, I'm just trying to think if there's... What do I do? Because I know we all could speak at great length, and we have some messages. Adriana has placed some information from the Baha'i perspective that you can look up. Peter has said that there can be no true peace without justice. And Shaheen, hello Shaheen, call out to Shaheen. All traditions believe in peace. The traditions are not the problem, the adherents are. So there is that piece of, we are human, yes, and we are not perfect, and we have much to work on. Is there anything, and there are thanks for a wonderful afternoon from everyone. Is there anything that anyone would like to add with we have enough time for maybe everybody to make a 1 minute or 30-second statement. So think really, what would be the last one sentence you would like to offer to everyone who's participating? One sentence without a lot of commas and and colons and semicolons. So shall we start? Rabbi Ellen?
I will end with a blessing. We often end our religious services with a prayer, a one-line prayer. And in Hebrew, well, I won't say it in Hebrew, I'll only say it in English. May the Eternal One who makes peace in high places cause peace to descend on us, on all the world. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Peter?
Well, good idea. I will say, go in peace to love and serve. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Who do I have next? Daryl.
I would say let's make it a living meditation, a living contemplation in our lives to bring peace into our actions, into our speech, into our thoughts, to work for peace in our families, in our communities, and in the world, and to do this with wholeheartedness and honesty.
Thank you.
And to forgive ourselves when we fail and begin again.
Adriana.
Well, I would like to say that I will conclude by saying that we have a lot of reasons to be very happy, because we need to be confident that it's going to happen. We will have peace. We just need to work on justice, work from an individual and collective level, and then we will have unity as well. So just live with a lot of hope and trust.
Thank you. Salam.
I would just want to say that at the end of it, to our young men and women who are listening to us today or later on, that don't worry about it. We are much better and more mature today than 100 years ago, and we will find our bearings, and we will find the solutions, and we'll get to peace. And I leave you all in peace as to our greetings. May peace be unto you all, and may the blessing and the mercy of God be unto all of us. Thank you.
Amen. We have I just want to read a note here from Asfar Adib. We are reaching an age when humans may no longer be needed for war. As technology advances, wars are now being conducted by drones or robots. So true humanitarian judgment may save us. And he said, thanks for a great session. I appreciate that comment. And I want to just end with a reading from Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. So may all go with peace in your hearts. And we thank you so much for having attended this session.
Thanks for inviting us. Thank you, Diane, for leading.
Very much.
Brian, I think you can